Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm back in the study even though it's sunny outside because I wanted to show off my shelves. Look at these. I've sorted 6 of my shelves on 2 of my bookcases in this side of my study, and I have I haven't chucked things out actually. I've made piles on the floor of things that I think are kind of less essential. I don't know where they're going to go. I say less essential. I've just seen down there 2 Muriel Spark books signed. Um, I've not even put them on my essential shelves. The rest are things that really, really mean a lot. Those hardbacks, there's 2 bookcases of hardbacks, and they're things that go right through um, the last 3 decades, really. And of course, everything's double stacked. They're all kind of they're larger format books, all of these things. And then in these shelves further down, level with where you sit, are things that I've said before that are for dipping into. Poetry, annuals, cartoon books, picture books, things that are kind of easy just to pick up and open at random and enjoy. Things that I know I'm going to. Lots and lots of pictures, books with lots of pictures. And of course, a second bookcase in front of that one, and that's for arm widths of things that I need to read next. That's my to be read bookcase. What's amazing about turning all this stuff over, it's like turning over a garden and seeing treasure that's been secreted away. Um, there are books here that I've not forgotten about, but have been tucked away for a while. Things like, I'm going to pull them all out now again and show you. Look at this. The Murdstone Trilogy by Mal Peet, which I read probably 10 years ago, a bit less maybe. He was a lovely kids writer, and this was an adult novel though. 2015, 9 years ago, I read it on holiday, I remember. And it was about a writer whose fantasy world comes to life. Philip Murdstone is a writer. He writes subtle YA books about sensitive boys, subtle books that don't sell. He does not write fantasy. He hates fantasy. Even the faintest whiff of goblins and elves brings him out in hives. But his agent, Minerva Cinch, informs him his career is kaput if he doesn't write fantasy. Luckily for Murdstone, it's at this exact moment he meets a strange creature from another realm. What could possibly go wrong? It was really funny. I do remember that. And I dropped it in something, so it's gone a bit um, uh, warpy and dried out, but that just adds to it. It was a book that I carried around with me on holiday and adored. Who else is here? Let me see. I'll pull all of these out. Uh, Trisha Ashley, this was the first one I read. She's become massive as a kind of contemporary romance person, but this was a Christmassy book she did, goodness knows when. I didn't write in when I read it, but it was Christmas when I read it, 2010. It's another one where people get snowed up in an old house and have to get on through the Christmas break. My favourite like that, of course, is Millie Johnson's book, I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day, um, which is just a classic of the kind. Laurie Graham, I don't think I've talked about her on this channel yet, but she is one of my favourite contemporary novelists. She's written slightly longer than I have. She was first publishing, I think, in the late 80s or early 90s, and I read her from the beginning. She wrote a very, very good book a very funny book about the stars of a daytime chat show who I believe get snowed in over Christmas. Every book that I like is about that. Anyway, they go bonkers, and but she's written all sorts of things. She wrote a book about the Kennedys. She wrote a book about the Duchess of Windsor. It's often from the point of view of a servant or somebody tangential to historical figures. Like Beryl Bainbridge, she began in the contemporary scene and then started doing historical novels. She's a very clever, very funny writer. Um, and this is one of her wartime books. They're usually about, GI brides who go back to America. She just has the knack of different voices. That's what I love about her as a novelist. Sorry, I'm in, inhaling dust. David Levitt is somebody as well who I've lost track with. I read him in the 1990s. I read absolutely everything. I've even got somewhere, there it is, a rare copy of While England Sleeps in hardback, because the initial run was pulped for legal reasons, because it was a kind of it was based on someone whose family objected, I believe, and he had to be rewritten. But I managed to get a copy of it in the first week it was out. But I loved all of his books. I don't know how they'd seem now. It's that slightly prissy tone to American gay fiction, kind of overeducated people trying to write English novels and sounding a bit 1920s. Maybe that's a bit unfair. No, he's a lovely writer. Maybe overly, a bit like Edmund White, slightly ornate to my ears now, perhaps. I don't know. Um, I should go back and reread. Maybe I'm being silly. Lost Language of the Cranes was filmed, and I think that's the first I knew of him. And they repeated it recently on the BBC 30 years on. Amazing to look back at this early 90s gay BBC play. And you realise we do live in a different world these days, for good and bad. Alice Munro is someone I've read a lot of. People I know really rate. She's a Canadian short story writer, and I've read more or less everything, I think. This is Open Secrets, which was Vintage about the time I was published by Vintage, mid 90s. Again, one of these people that I was incredibly proud to be on the same list with, in the same catalogue when those came out. Um, her short stories are wonderful. They're long and they're composed like novels, and you feel like you've read a novel when you go into them. And her longer stories are like Chinese boxes where there are interleaved um, time periods. You go back and back and back in time. Very clever, very smooth. And here's a Jeanette Winterson that I read her for years. I stopped because I thought she was going off. This is one of the last ones I read. It's a memoir, um, Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal, where she revisits the material of her childhood, of her first book, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. I wasn't sure what I thought about that. She was kind of writing what they call a misery memoir when it comes to lower class writers than her. I thought it was riven with a kind of class snobbery, actually, oddly enough. When she talks about going into wherever it is in Manchester, she goes to find her birth mother. It feels a bit like Levenshulme, and she's kind of horrified by the the squalor of South Manchester being so kind of fancy these days, and that amused me. As someone who who lives in South Manchester, I don't know. I once saw Jeanette Winterson standing in the station at Piccadilly, waiting for the train to London, and I said hello. I didn't know her. I just said hello, and I think I even said something about loving her books, and she looked so miserable. And I thought, um, I was in the middle of a really horrible time when our house had fallen in and everything had been ruined by terrible builders who were working on next door. We were in the middle of this crisis. And I used to go into town and work in cafes to get away from the mess. And I just thought, well, I wish I had your job, Jeanette. Anyway, it doesn't do, as I always say, it doesn't do to compare yourself across to other writers or other people and what they're doing. People are stuck in their own um, concerns, aren't they? You've got to get on with your own. I don't know why I'm pulling those out, really. It's interesting. Skellig, look, David Almond, this is a copy from 1998. And David uh, used to teach for the same kind of distance learning thing that I used to teach creative writing. So I knew him going back years, even before Skellig ever came out. And I've got collections of his from when he published with Iron Press. He's a really wonderful writer. Um, you can. The funny thing with reading his stuff is you can almost feel him writing the pages by longhand. There's something not laborious, but something crafted, something that's of the page. You can feel him composing it and chiseling away words to leave just the essence. That's how I always feel with his stuff. Now I've got to go back to reading because tonight it's book club, and I've finished the book club book. It's oh, hang on, it's over here. For once, I actually stuck with the book club book and enjoyed it. It's a very dense, very literary novel, and I mean literary. God, people misuse that term all the time. I once had somebody really stupid try and tell me that literary novels were novels with educated or posh people in, and I went through the roof. I was so angry with him. Literary novels seem to me to be books in which things are in question, the stabilities of everything. What is art? What is literature? What's a book? What's writing? What's a story? What is history? Who are we? What is consciousness? It brings up, I suppose, philosophical questions. That's what literary fiction does. And it sometimes roots them in the everyday. Sometimes it roots them in the lives of characters that we haven't looked at closely before and illuminates a corner of experience that you don't often see in fiction, which is why I would discount as literary fiction lots of the boring, wanky novels about, about very well off people worrying about stuff. I think literary fiction draws attention to itself and its own status as fiction as well. It's slightly different to metafiction, that it's something about the materiality of the novel itself. And that's this fits that perfectly. It's a kind of history of Europe, Central Europe, since the 1930s, embodied in this image of the glass room, in this ultra sophisticated modernist house in the woods. And it's a history of the Nazis and the Jews and people fleeing across Europe, becoming refugees. It's a story about refugees and people, how people become refugees and lose everything and have to find new lives, uh, and how it rips apart their public lives, their secret lives. There's lots about secret lives in this. Very, very subtle book. I wasn't expecting it to be as moving as it was for some reason. I thought it was going to be quite cool and intellectual, and it is, but it really makes you feel for these characters. There's revelations at the end where people are in more or less the present day, and you find out what's happened to certain people. You find out secrets that have been withheld from everybody, including the reader, and it's very wounding. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about it too much now because I've got to talk about it tonight with the others at book club. I don't want to wear myself out with talk about this, but it's really to be recommended. Glassroom, Simon Mower, Mawer. I'm not sure. Mawer. I'm one to talk with my name. Anyway, I'm still reading the biography of Leonora Carrington very slowly, very carefully. Again, an immensely subtle book about somebody who is essentially a refugee through the 20th century. And her life tells the story of almost a whole century. And Jerry Potter's book, I'm not sure about the fourth one I was reading, which was a bit of a daft romantic comedy that might have already gone stale on me. But I'm ready to start new things this week. I'm longing to take time off, although actually writing work's going very slowly. I'm progressing very slowly with the projects I'm doing. I have been caught up in art and doing pictures and all of that stuff. Now it's t-shirts, um, producing panda t-shirts for people. That's all fun. Anyway, in amongst all of the business, it's been a funny old time in lots of ways. Maybe I'll elaborate on that at some point. But I'm going to enjoy the rest of my bank holiday Monday and not do any writing. I'm going to read and then eventually go and see people at book club. I hope you're having a good day, whether you're working or whether you're taking time off, whether you're reading or just thinking about what you're going to read next. In some ways, it's one of the happiest things of all to do. um, because the book hasn't got you yet. It's still all to be imagined. It could still be the best book in the world. I'm going to say goodbye and do all the things, like and subscribe and spread the word. I'm enjoying my YouTube channel a lot still. I'm going to carry on doing these as long as you carry on watching them. Okay, goodbye, and I'll see you again soon in the next episode.